feel like I should have theme music here. You know, Herb Alpert. We are live. It's Thursday night. Sigmund Bloom, Matt Waldman, and of course, if you know Matt Waldman, you know it's RSP time. So get your pre-orders in. It's coming, and it's what you need, really. We actually we're loving jigsaw puzzles right now, Matt. And
nice.
I drank and I did one of those Bloody Marys that never gets empty for like 2 hours. You just keep kind of half filling it up. I bought like 7 jigsaw puzzles, but man, the RSP, that's better than a jigsaw puzzle. I mean, it's the jigsaw puzzle of the pieces that the teams are going to put together starting at the draft. So Matt Waldman, RSP, everybody. And we still got stuff to talk about since the last we were here, Matt, in the last week. And what's great is because Matt is in the bunker doing the RSP right now. You're sometimes hearing about these moves for the first time when we talk live on here. And when we were talking before the show, I brought up Marcus Mariota, and you asked me when I said Raiders, and you just laughed, a genuine laugh of delight. Unpack that laugh for me.
It's really actually a very cruel laugh, probably more of like, a kid who likes watching cartoons and that Wile E. Coyote's going to get it, with his latest plan to foil the Roadrunner. And I just feel like that John Gruden and quarterbacks has just never been a great match there. So here he is. He's kind of got Mariota, in line to replace Derek Carr. And so, I just see disaster there in this sense. I mean, I know that he had good luck with Rich Gannon, but Rich Gannon was a way better pocket player than Mariota ever could hope to be. Mariota is not an improvisational thinker. He's a good athlete, and people confuse great athletic ability with great improvisational ability. But he's, kind of like Robert Griffin, where he was kind of a straight line-ish guy. He puts himself into danger. He doesn't know when to stop and throw the ball away, when not to take that extra step. So it's just one of those deals where on the surface, it's going to be very encouraging and there's going to be some hope there for it. But I just don't like the matchup there. Though at the same time, because Derek Carr is a good guy to follow the rules, Mariota is a very good follow the rules type of player, but their weaknesses are one and the same. And what Gruden needs is a guy who can follow the rules, but when they don't, they make good decisions so that when Gruden yells at him, he can just turn around and look at him and say, "Shut up!" We just got a first down, and just kind of move on from there. So I'm not loving that. It seems like another recipe for bad reality show TV by the NFL.
Yeah, it's like a 2-year, $17 million deal. Matt, I think like 7-8 million guaranteed this year, but it can be up to 47 million with incentives. And I know there's a minimal cap hit next year for Carr, like 2.5 million. They could trade Carr. Carr is the kind of quarterback like Alex Smith. He's in that Alex Smith level where he's not going to get your team over the hump. But there are coaches out there like, I wish I had a Derek Carr right now. Yeah. So we'll see. But I understand a little bit of a cruel laugh. It's okay because Gruden has actually shown he's above the mockery that some, maybe even me at times, summoned up for him. We'll see what happens in Las Vegas. Speaking of, let's just go to this subject, quarterbacks, since we started with Mariota, okay? Because we've got 3 quarterbacks, and we can do them least to most interesting, okay? 3 quarterbacks out there still don't have a job, and as it stands right now, well, the Patriots, Jared Stidham, we talked about that last week. And it really looks like they're not going to. And again, the larger topic that I have in mind for tonight, and I'll write something up on it, is how is the no offseason season, and it might not even start on time if we do have a season, how's that going to change our expectations of the range of outcomes? What should we be looking for? And in the case of the Patriots, totally ramping up a new quarterback, probably not in the cards. Chargers are also not giving any signs that they're going to do that. There's quarterbacks to be taken in the draft, but probably at least week 1, there's no way these guys are starting. They still have another chapter or more in their career. Let's start with the least interesting, Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton. I mean, really, the Bengals' offensive line just collapsed around him. AJ Green didn't stay healthy. I mean, he's still the same guy. Maybe he's not at the Alex Smith level, but he's still at the level where you think maybe he could be better than he was in Cincinnati at his next stop. If it's a stop where he can be an extension of an offensive minded coach, like in Jacksonville, if Jacksonville brought him in to compete with Gardner Minshew, I think he probably would be better than Minshew right now in that offense. What do you think the next chapter is for Andy Dalton?
It's a good question. There's two teams that I think that would have been perfect for him in terms of what he can do to manage a game and to just kind of, it wouldn't be a sexy pick for either one, but the Raiders would have been one of them. I think that would have been a better choice, to have him backing up Carr. But then again, he's a little more competent than what Mariota is. Mariota's more up and down of a player, so people associate the excitement of Mariota and think he's better than Dalton, whereas I might say that they're probably roughly equal, and Dalton gets the edge if he had a better team around him. So I would have liked that more, but that would have threatened Carr even more. I think the New England Patriots would have been in a good position, and it may not be too late. They might decide, you know what, if they don't like what they see out of Stidham, if we have a camp for them to look and see how he's doing, they might look at Dalton, who's, more of a short passing game guy. They're more of a short passing game team. He's a smart guy who probably would be able to handle things reasonably well in Josh McDaniels' offense. So I like that possibility, but he may wind up in a situation where he's like that injury, pull the cord kind of emergency quarterback that comes in, early in the year and has to learn the offense on the fly, but still performs reasonably well, because that seems like what we have, in the mix with somebody like him.
The Ryan Fitzpatrick zone. Where he's usually better than the guy they have, but not good enough to be the guy for the long haul at this point in his career. But I sense a little respect there for Dalton. I think that he still has some viable quarterback football left in him, at least compared to what we see on Sundays sometimes. Okay, second most interesting of the three, Jameis Winston. What's next? I mean, does he start to just sort of swirl down the drain as a backup? Is it getting passed over for teams saying, well, we know we can do better than that? Or does he author a more triumphant act 2 somewhere where, he can reduce the parts of his game, or the pitfalls, the quicksand, and mature later in his career?
Well, the pessimist in me says the first answer should be he should start working in his broadcast game to start doing FSU broadcasts. That's probably that's the pessimist in me. But the optimist in me, knowing that what Winston is also capable of equally, as good, the equal good to the equal bad, he could wind up as one of those guys who ends up. I see it like this. I could see him in Buffalo backing up Josh Allen doing something Josh Allen like to, like, I don't know, maybe running around, 2 miles in every direction, and then somehow ending up in a situation where he's off the field for an extended period of time due to some crazy injury that he inflicts on himself. And then we have Winston in there, and Winston goes bonkers and ends up having like a great season. And then you have the Rob Johnson, Doug Flutie kind of thing, but to an elevated, magnified degree statistically of who they should have and what they should do. And should they do anything with Winston? And it doesn't have to be Buffalo. It could be any team. It could be Chicago. It could be, a situation like that where the starter is kind of on the brink of being good, but there's still skepticism about him, and rightfully so. And they bring him in as kind of more of a backup, and they assure the starter, but I think the intentions are even really to just say, we need a stronger backup in here. We can have him, and maybe we'll be able to trade him, or we're giving him a cheap opportunity because nobody else is taking him. and then he ends up on the field and performs well enough that then you have a quarterback controversy the following year. That would be kind of a very Jameis Winston-like thing to happen to his career at this point, and what, you know, in terms of how that goes. But I just think that he's someone ideally would need to wind up on a. I just think that he's in a situation where we know he's a smart guy. He knows where he's been. I think, you know, what kind of player he could be. And I think the fact that he's taken this downturn in a sense where no one really wants him, or if it continues to be prolonged this way, that it could really affect his confidence, especially if he winds up on a team where they're really hard on everything. They're saying, we're going to train the interceptions out of him, you know, and the next thing you know, he's basically lost his mojo, and he's rendered ineffective at that point. So we'll see how that goes. But to me, if John Gruden didn't take a guy like Winston, then I'm not really sure, you know, there's going to be anybody else out there that's going to see him as a viable starter at this stage.
Yeah, Bruce Arians was a good match for him, really.
Yeah.
And we saw how that went. And you're right that in his Tampa, he's just been allowed to be Jameis. But now, like you said, it isn't a guarantee that he'll land in an organization that gets him as a player, and will try to want to make him something different, or, you know, a backup. They're going to make him a backup, but he can still be the kind of quarterback that could win 3 or 4 games late in the season, look good enough to get a shot somewhere the following year, and then be Jameis Winston again. So, again, more interesting than Dalton, not as interesting as Cam Newton. And I know that there is an element of the medical side which is playing into this, again, with this theme of how what's going on right now in the world is going to change the NFL season. And that's actually a dog on our balcony, everybody. But it's good because this is a good time to have like a German Shepherd patrolling your balcony. Our next door neighbors, you share balconies in New Orleans.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's Cam Newton. Now we can't know his health, and again, that may slow down the process of him landing somewhere because of that. And you see it, Matt. That, you know, there's some people who's like just with conviction will say he's not a good leader. He gives up on his team. You know, the point at the fumble that he didn't go after in the Super Bowl. You know, and say there are organizations where he wouldn't be welcome. Like they just know that Cam Newton is, you know, and I haven't seen any indications of that from anyone around Carolina or Ron Rivera or anything. So, you know, that plays into this. How is he perceived? Leaving aside that maybe he's just going to fizzle out because he's broken physically. If that doesn't happen, what happens? What happens next for Cam Newton? It's so wild that he's just in a free fall right now. When 3, 4, 5 years ago, he was one of the truly elite quarterbacks in the league.
Yeah, it's sad, and it's funny because last night I got a message from someone who is affiliated with the league in a certain way that, you know, and I would say in that way they're affiliated pretty deeply into the league. And they said to me just off the, you know, I didn't bring up the conversation, and just kind of contacted me and said, might not be a better example of underlying NFL culture issues than the C labels about character concerns about Cam Newton, who's never had real character concerns during his NFL career. Personality and big ego, sure, but the dude never backs down, to his detriment in terms of playing through injuries. It's just fascinating to me how a little more precise language about Newton would have helped these public debates immensely, because there's too many people parroting already secondhand info from scouting reports, right, and scouting departments. You know, and I think and we tend to overanalyze. And, you know, when we start talking about he didn't go after the fumble, I mean, it's just like, you know, it's that type of image that can be very unfair about a player, that can, you just kind of whitewash their entire career with something like that. So, you know, I don't know where Newton's going to wind up. You know, he's the type of player that I honestly think the reason he isn't like signed already, is because teams are circumspect about his injury issue. So it's hard to put that aside, because to me, if there's, let's say there's 8 teams that might be interested in him, if just throwing out a number, yeah, sure, maybe 5 of them are stupid and are just doing the whole parroting the secondhand scouting report, but the other 3 might be smart about it, but are so worried about him actually being able to stay put together that they're not even going to give it a look, considering what they could maybe get in the draft at this stage. But I think he's a guy that I don't, he's the best of the bunch. I don't see how, clearly in terms of what he could offer you. But that's the issue, is I think the teams ultimately are afraid that we're going to get one great year out of him. Then we're going to want to sign him to a contract because we're going to feel the pressure to do so because he played well. The teams respond around him. And then he's going to do something and get hurt. And then we're not going to have him, and we're going to be on the hook. And he's at the end of his career, and I think that to them, they're looking at that safer bullet point of Andy Dalton as a result of that, as opposed to a guy like Winston, but I do think that, maybe that, or maybe also because everything going on in our society right now has just slowed things down. And maybe that's why he's not been signed, because they would have liked to have gotten a closer look at him in terms of, let's work you out. Let's examine the arm. Let's, have some one-on-one personal time here. And they're not quite doing that right now, as anyone is not quite doing that, and I guess Zoom calls aren't really enough.
Yeah, I think there's a difference with Matt. You think of it like chemical reactions. I remember in high school, like when you're mixing chemicals and chemistry. We talk about chemistry in football a lot, locker room chemistry and things like that. And the quarterback is a big deal, like in the central nervous system of the brain of a team. Quarterback is an important region, and teams are an organism, sort of a mass consciousness organism, and their head coach and their quarterback are hugely important to the way everything is cast for that team. If you bring in an Andy Dalton, you bring in a Jameis Winston, it's not anything that really sends ripples through the locker room, because I think Winston and Dalton have a reputation around the league, again, like better than some of the options that play, but always you'll feel like you want something better than what they represent. Cam Newton, on the other hand, has seemed like he has overcome, his greatness has come from him, not just from absorbing his surroundings at different times in his career, his rookie year, the Super Bowl year. There are times when he is just a virtuoso at the position, and he's an alpha in his own way, but he's an alpha. Whatever organization Cam Newton would be brought into, it would change the organism, Now, it could end up being whatever organization brings him in looks absolutely brilliant in hindsight. Or it just could be that we've seen the best of him because of something physical. It's really interesting, though. I mean, it's much more interesting than Tom Brady. Much more.
I don't know how the Chargers don't consider it, and then at the same time too, you look at if it gets desperate, I mean, I think these are also teams that are going to be waiting for an injury, say Kirk Cousins gets hurt, I don't know, doing a selfie, asking everybody how they like that, and he runs into a Coke machine and knocks himself silly. I don't know. They bring in Cam Newton, and then that would be interesting to see if he'd be a fantastic fit in that offense, to be honest.
And from the mating dance part of this, it'll be interesting to see if Cam does sign before the season or just waits because he's going to be discriminating about where he decides to go, or if he just wants to be in an organization, and what kind of compensation are these guys going to get? Because really, Cam Newton is in true market value, probably shouldn't sign for less than $20 million a year, no matter what role he's promised or anything like that, just based on his track record as a quarterback, assuming he can pass a physical. But I don't think he's going to get that. I don't think teams are going to have that allotted for him. So we'll see. But I think this Cam Newton thing is real fascinating.
And it could shake out also till after the draft, because some teams are like, let's see if we can get Tua. Let's see if we can get
Sure.
Joe Burrow. Maybe one team really likes Jacob Eason or or Justin Herbert, and if they don't get one of those guys, they go, you know what? Let's do it. Maybe we're in a position where we can pull the trigger on Cam.
Yeah, and I'd like to think that the team, I want it to be the Steelers, but the team that takes a chance on him, the Steelers don't have the money to do it though. Looks brilliant again in hindsight, and he still has maybe not 100% Cam football, but good enough. And if he's in a good situation, I forget who it was in my mentions today. Matt was talking about him as a Kyle Shanahan quarterback in San Francisco. Oh, okay. Imagine if Cam Newton was the quarterback for San Francisco in the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl last year.
Yeah, so it'd be great. And any team that's going to run a lot of play action and allow you to, kind of use him to roll him out and throw on the move and do some of that would be really nice, and would be a really nice fit with him. And I think that that's something that people don't think about as much because they think of him as kind of a spread quarterback. But under center, with the play action game could be really fun with him.
Yeah, he's imposing. He's still an imposing quarterback to face as a defensive coordinator. Okay, let's talk about his old team, Carolina. Interesting turn of events this week, Matt. Robbie Anderson, who Matt Rule coached at Temple, signed to a 2-year, $20 million deal. I don't think there's any overt signs that Curtis Samuel is on the block. And I'll admit to maybe overreacting to this in the sense that, thinking of the Panthers as a 2 wide receiver offense, but, a chance to see more of this perspective and to reflect the idea that the Matt Rule offense, the Joe Brady offense, and remember Brady and Teddy Bridgewater know each other from being in New Orleans together. Brady was an assistant when Bridgewater was here in 2018. So they know each other. Again, this idea of no off season, so there has to be some familiarity to expect a quarterback to make an impact right away with his new team. And then you start getting, maybe, Matt, you get kind of excited when you think about Robbie Anderson deep and Curtis Samuel running those crossers and quick slants and screens and jet sweeps and things like that. And then DJ Moore carving up defenses, and Teddy Bridgewater, a healthy Teddy Bridgewater. And again, I always feel like I'm going to bring this up every time until people get sick of it. He had barely played meaningful football in like 4 years last year and got better as he came on. Matt, I know you were a champion of Teddy, but now when you picture this, now, I mean, are we going to actually have a chance to see Teddy, like, what? We don't have to wonder what he could have become in the NFL. Is this something that interests you or even invigorates you?
I mean, I think it's worthwhile watching and seeing, because he seemed to be on the verge of a breakout season before he tore up the knee. So, looking at it from that perspective, giving him another weapon, one that he was familiar with when he had his stint with the Jets, and the fact, like you said, he's nailed it. Robbie Anderson's going to stretch the field. You're going to have the underneath routes from Samuel and Moore. They've lost Olsen, and Ian Thomas is an interesting athlete who can catch the football, and he might be able to replace some of that. But really what you're getting is, Matt Rule at Baylor also liked to spread the field. Let's spread the field out. So you have Christian McCaffrey. Only makes sense that McCaffrey would be, in a spread deal like that. So why not, see what you can do. Now, can Bridgewater actually throw the ball deep accurately? Because I've never seen him really do that to a great degree at Louisville, and, when he was there, and you never really saw him with great accuracy down the field, so maybe that'll help, it'll help threaten the field a little bit more. And Anderson is a guy who can be physical and work over the middle too. So it's not, necessarily just about go routes with Bridgewater. But at the same time, I guess my excitement about it is, can Bridgewater help them play winning football? And I think the answer is yes. Can Bridgewater be a Pro Bowl caliber producer? I don't think so. Not this year, especially not this year with everything going on. But I think that he's a guy that can give you like good Andy Dalton year type of production, that what we saw out of Cincinnati, which is, good enough that you might look at him, and from fantasy perspective, we might say bye-week starter, good bye-week starter, maybe even low-end quarterback one.
Yeah, well, especially this year for fantasy, what's going to balance it out is that Carolina is totally rebuilding on the defensive side of the ball. You know,
Yeah.
so I think that you could see him having to play from behind, and the offense having to rely more on him. One of the things I want to note too, again, being here on the ground in New Orleans, there's a love, truly a love of this city for Teddy Bridgewater. And Matt, I know you talked about this when he was a prospect, and you always do a great job analyzing body language and putting it together with like the context. And I think that with Bridgewater, he was guarded, I think, during the draft process, rightfully, and you didn't see his light, his personality as much as you're seeing it now. And I think he's confident, and I think that he will win over, as he always has, the confidence of his teammates, and they'll be buy-in. And like you say, it translates to winning, or at least being competitive ahead of schedule, or taking the play to the field. Because I think you mentioned Andy Dalton. That's not a bad comparison in the sense that you're going to build an offense around Bridgewater's ability to make valid reads and deliver the ball on time, execute basically. Not necessarily when things go off script, but if you have a defense and if you have an offense scheme, play calls, play designs, and personnel to create advantages, he's going to find those advantages and exploit them. So that's exciting. Go ahead.
And the thing about Bridgewater is during that pre-draft process, they actually, the NFL has a kind of a test that they use that was developed by the military. That's kind of this military style interview, interrogation type of thing, where they want to see how good of a leader you are. And of all the quarterbacks that they tested across the league, he had the highest leadership scores, even though there was a lot going on said about him. That's why, what we ended up talking about years ago, on this very show, why I was fairly, outspoken about all of this, because he was a guy that tested out extremely well. And then when you look at his interview, even with something as simple as like the Gruden, quarterback camp, when you look at body language and you look at the way that the guy responded to questions, when Gruden has always been very good at being able to sneak some things in there, or just kind of put something, make the guy feel good for a while, and then say some things or show them some things that says, okay, how are you going to respond to what I'm showing you here? And, there are a number of quarterbacks that were in that class that when they were shown things that necessarily weren't favorable about them, you could see them trying to hide in nonverbal ways, kind of visual cues. And Bridgewater wasn't that way. And Bridgewater is also a tough guy. He's always been an extremely tough guy. And anyone that knows anything about him knows that this guy's a football player who is, he's the type of guy that, the Syracuse, I think he was either Syracuse or FSU, where he got hit and basically broke his jaw on the first play of the game, where he got sacked, and then he just tore it up after that. And that Gruden asked him about it, and he basically was like, I was mad, and at that point it was on. Like he basically said it was on from that point. And so when you have there's players that when you get knocked around, they shrink from competition. And there's some that are like, you just tick me off, and you don't have to be a big guy to do that. I mean, the way I'll put it to you, and I'll end it this way, is kind of a little funny story, is I knew a guy who worked at a convenience store, and he was like a short, thin kid who worked nights at a convenience store in Athens, and somebody held him up at gunpoint when he was at the store, and he had a bad temper. And he was one of those people that, fortunately for him, he didn't get hurt, but his reaction, fight or flight is your reaction. Well, Bridgewater's kind of that little kid who has that fight in him. And this kid, when the guy held him up, and he goes, "Give me all the money in the register." He says, "You want all the money in the register? You want all the money?" And he picked up the register and threw it at the guy. And the guy ended up catching it, hitting his head on the back of the floor, and was not cold. And they basically, but he didn't even realize he did that. And, he just responded in that fight or flight way. And some people have that kind of fight tendency in them, and Bridgewater's that kind of guy. And I think that you're going to see that as the Carolina Panthers go. As long as he can stay healthy, you're going to see the good side of that. Well, let's hope the line can put it together for him.
And the team will take on that personality on offense to some extent. But it's funny too, because Greg Cosell put out a couple of little scouting reports on T. Higgins and Michael Pittman. But I see him mentioning this a lot. And Matt, I feel like this term or these ideas are being mentioned more when I see players talked about in a draft context than I saw mentioned 5 or 10 or 15 years ago. I suppose maybe more the way that we out here talk about football players, and maybe in scouting circles, this has been something used more, forever, because football people would get this, but the term is like competitive toughness or combativeness, this idea of what you're talking about in that moment when you're challenged, that you summon up a reaction that is beyond yourself, like but focused and effective. It's just like we were talking about quarterback play earlier with Marcus Mariota and the problem that he had in Derek Carr, even to an extent. It is getting those meaningful instructions, being in tune with everything that's happening, and acting, validly, like you talk about with the thousands of hours to be able to improvise perfectly. So it's going to be exciting. Now, Robbie Anderson's old team, and it's funny, Matt, I think it got out there that, the Jets offered Robbie Anderson more money, which I don't know if it was denied or disputed, but it just doesn't necessarily make sense. A lot of people speculating, of course, that's coming from Adam Gase. It's been something that has really been a motif in his Jets era, him getting things out that he wanted to try to frame things that would happen in a way that was more favorable to him. They did get Brashad Perryman. So, actually, if we look at how Perryman was playing late last year, maybe in a football sense, now again, because there's not going to be the ramp up for a new player. I mean, you would think that would put an emphasis on keeping your own players because of that continuity for 2020. So there's that, although Perryman by the end of the year is making a pretty big impact in Tampa. But man, when I look at the Jets, I just feel like nothing can grow in this dirt. Like it's been salted, like it's just Adam Gase. Like I don't even want to, and poor Le'Veon Bell, I don't, even Jamison Crowder is interesting, but I look at the Jets and I feel like it's like, I just want to turn around and walk the other way.
Was this the point that I should have interrupted you and say, drunkenly, I want to kiss you, Siggy? I think that might have been the curse with it. I don't know what's going on with the Jets, but I'll say this. I'm a little skeptical about Brashad Perriman. He has played well the past 2 seasons, or season and the third, or however you want to say his time in Cleveland was. But in each of those instances, he was protected because he had other players around him that were capable talents that I don't think Perriman had to be the guy. Mm-hmm. And, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, I mean, how much more protected can you get? That might be one of the, 4 to 5 best wide receiver combos in the league. And I'm probably being conservative by that estimate. I was going to go to New York. I just don't know how I feel about that one. I think that, obviously he's redeemed himself to the point that he's getting that chance again to be the guy. This will be that litmus test for him for sure, especially another year with Sam Darnold, hopefully growing in the right direction this year and being able to stay, hopefully, everybody in New York, send out the best everybody there for sure. But, you think about him having mono and you think about what he went through last year. Hopefully he'll be able to stay healthy and especially so that they can develop, moving forward and be able to have that. But, I don't see Perriman as a great inside route runner, and they need a guy who can play in the middle of the field well. And that was always his weakness. So if he can continue to take those steps forward where he's, not only just improved, but he's also really good now in that area, then we can see something happen from it. But the New York Jets seem like a wasteland to me at this stage until we see better.
Yeah, but Adam Gase. Just that Adam Gase continues to be a head coach and to be kind of one of these coach king head coaches. It just seems like life's not fair sometimes.
Yeah.
It's not. So make it more lighthearted. I'll make it more lighthearted now because this is fun. We've had a playful relationship for over a decade now because of your Cleveland roots and my Pittsburgh roots and just the dynamic. I'll go there, because I'm a Pittsburgh Pirates fan. How it is to be the also watching the team be the also ran. I remember growing up and like the one truism was like that the Steelers own the Browns.
Yeah. Oh,
It
for
was,
sure.
it was just like a self esteem moment. Well, no matter what, the Steelers always own the Browns. They'll always own the Browns, and it plays out. But then at times it's like Le'Veon Bell comes to mind. You'll cheer me up because, and I know that Mount Harmon, I love Matt Harmon, was thinking of me, and I can't remember what he said, like it was faded or something like that. When Eric freaking Ebron became a Pittsburgh Steeler, Matt, hold me. I mean, I immediately got a flash to an important moment in an important game, and he's going to be targeted, and I'm going to say, why? So talk me out of that nightmare.
Well, he'll get you. He'll do enough so that your team can be in that moment. So if there's any kind of consolation, there's that. He is obviously he's an extremely talented football player. Jared Cook was a guy.
He came on. He became later.
Who was more Ebron than Ebron is.
Yeah.
So, and you can see that he's certainly grown up through his career. So there's hope that a guy with that level of athletic ability does finally play with a greater level of consistency, and he ends up being what the Steelers hoped they would have got out of Ladarius Green.
Yeah, they were excited about him. Concussion issues. We'll see what happens with Ebron. Not much there for fantasy, but adds another interesting dimension.
Could be. I mean, look what he did 2 years ago.
Vance McDonald isn't. Yeah, and Vance McDonald isn't known for staying healthy, and Ebron is definitely that big target for Ben Roethlisberger.
And they can go to, and if they're not enthusiastic about their wide receiver play necessarily, they can go to tight ends. They can establish the run a little bit more, and we can see, they are a grounded and pounded team when they want to be. And I wish they'd continue to be that, just from the standpoint of as a football fan who likes to watch good football. When they're running the ball, they're tough to beat.
Moving on. Jared Cook. I think you mentioned Jared Cook. I will say this, and I will draw this one distinction between Cook and Ebron, although Cook was a late bloomer in a way. Cook always had those moments, those transcendent moments where the integrated technique, like his athleticism would intersect with an inspired perfect play on the ball in the air, or just the ability to contort or reach a ball that not everyone could do or get to, even with his speed. With Ebron, I always feel like his athleticism has to overcome just a lack of consistent skill from him. That's why I have that shuddering nightmare. But it's going to happen. We'll talk about it. We'll remember this moment, March 26th. We'll talk about it on the show the week after it happens. Maybe the opposite side here is what the Saints did. Emmanuel Sanders. And I think they said the Saints came back to win free agency in the fourth quarter. They got Andrews Pete locked up for 5 more years for like $57 million. Keep the offensive line together, and they got Sanders on a 2-year, $16 million year. Sanders got like the same deal basically as Jimmy Graham. I don't know what Ryan Pace was thinking. Anyway, Sanders, I felt like, Matt, that there was an Emmanuel Sanders size hole in this offense. I think that it's perfect. It's ideal, and it's a meaningful upgrade that could give them that upper hand. Like in the game against San Francisco, they lost 46-45 or 48-46. Sanders had a great game. And Sanders came in and seamlessly, now he didn't know the Kyle Shanahan offense because Gangarello was doing something similar in Denver. But I think Sanders is one of those veterans, especially with Drew Brees, that the lack of an offseason not going to hurt him. Good, so I love this move, but again, it could be just the New Orleans air.
No, it's definitely not the New Orleans era, though. I can say that last week when you brought up Ryan Pace and Jimmy Graham, that was the first I heard it, and I woke up in the middle of the night laughing, actually thinking about that.
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh no, I got to get to work," but I did. I woke up. I think I woke up having a dream that happened, and then I was like, "Oh wait,
That
that really did
happened.
happen." Okay, but Sanders, listen, probably one of the best route runners in the league, and paired with one of the best quarterbacks of all time, and you put that in an offense that's going to know how to use them. That's just fantastic. I'm happy for Sanders because Sanders, I've heard him interviewed. I've seen him in Denver when I was with Cecil for an event, and he was being interviewed, and he just seemed to have a real chip on his shoulder about what he was getting paid and if he was going to get paid and how much, and all that kind of stuff. And he kind of had, you could look at it and look at him and go, oh, he's kind of an angry dude who's like, who's always complaining about stuff. Or you could look at it and say, it's a really underappreciated football player who knows his value and hasn't gotten it. And I think it's more the latter. And so I'm really excited about seeing him on this team because it's going to take a whole lot of pressure off Mike Thomas. It's going to be a situation where he's going to be able to make the plays. You're going to have Mike Thomas being able to work like underneath or outside on the boundaries on some of those back shoulder type of plays and go a little bit deeper. But Ted Ginn isn't that guy you want running dig routes, or the deep slant or the skinny post or anything that Drew Brees could throw pinpoint in there, and the guy's and they end up dropping, So Sanders is just perfect for what they like to do, and that to me that puts that offense over the top with Brees. I mean, I think that how you don't say that this team, especially with the way the defense has played, it's an up and coming defense, has played well. How this team isn't one of the 2 to 3 teams to beat in the NFC, right. I don't know. I mean, that move is just a perfect piece of the puzzle being clicked in there.
Continuity, and I mean the Niners will be good again. They traded away DeForest Buckner, and they'll have 2 first-round picks. Probably one of them will be a wide receiver. That'll be interesting. And then get your RSP so you'll know about that wide receiver whenever the Niners draft a first-rounder. But I think, of course, the Saints, it's still inexplicable. The Brees played not very well when they lost to the Vikings. But looking forward, we're always looking forward, not backward. K1, what does the Gordon signing do to Lindsey's value? I think it was your man Jay Moyer who was saying when he's reacting to the Gordon signing, saying undrafted free agents have to earn every dollar, something like that. Just undrafted free agents have to continually prove themselves. Our friend Ryan Riddle, who says early draft picks have to prove they can't play, or late draft picks, undrafted players have to prove they can.
Yep.
So Gordon and Lindsey, Pat Shurmur taking over the offense there, Drew Lock, what do we think about this from fantasy perspective, and just Gordon, who colossally failed by not taking the offer the Chargers gave him? By the way, this is much more cut and dry than Le'Veon Bell. There's an argument to Le'Veon Bell win. Well, now he's with Gase. Kind of there's a last laugh, like how much money is that really worth to you? But Gordon left money on the table. There was money on the table from the Chargers that he's not going to see, probably never, as the league as a whole has really wised up. Aaron Jones is going to be an interesting one. There was a piece, I think Kevin Domofsky, Rob Domofsky, I don't know. Anyway,
Rob.
Was on ESPN, and they asked the scouts, because they have Kenny Clark and Bakhtiari coming up. I think Lindsley, they have a lot of players coming up next year as free agents. And where would Aaron Jones rank in priorities? And they said no higher than 4th, because the league just knows don't pay a running back. Don't give a running back a second contract. That's where we're at right now. But what do we think about, at least in the short term, Gordon and Lindsey?
I mean, I think they're going to look at it as the same way they did. They saw what happened with the Chargers when they faced the Chargers when Gordon was at his quote unquote peak. And so, it was Gordon with plus another back, whether it was Woodhead or Eckler. And so they're going to see Lindsey as the Eckler, and Royce Freeman's going to be the reserve, and Gordon's going to get his touches. And I think that's just how that works. And Jay loves Lindsey, and certainly, and Jay is a very much an aficionado of decision making for running backs, how good of a decision maker a running back is. And Lindsey certainly has proven to be one of the better decision makers. And so when you get into the subtleties of reading blocking schemes and how well they perform, that a guy like Lindsey passes the test very strongly for, from that perspective. But at the same time, a guy like Gordon gives you some things that he can mess up the blocking scheme, but because he has enough after contact balance and some skills, to be able to break tackles, some teams value that a little bit more. It's kind of like Miles Sanders. We could spend all day talking about how Miles Sanders had certain flaws with how he couldn't run zone schemes extremely well, but with the speed and with the athletic ability, there is a point where you just kind of say, well, he'll develop as long as we see signs of development, or we can put him in situations where he can win, not a problem. And I think with Gordon, they feel the same way, that they get a guy who can hold up a little bit more. And I don't think they trust Lindsey to hold up. And I think it has less to do about his undrafted free agent status at this point, because once you become a Pro Bowl player, and that's what Lindsey is, we can sit and talk about being a UDFA all you want. But the point of the matter is now he is one-time Pro Bowler, and considered that. So to me, the issue isn't whether is he still good and has to prove himself. It's whether or not they feel like he's big enough to be able to handle the workload. And I think that most teams don't see a player like Lindsey as a full-time back, no matter when they draft him. Because we've seen that with a lot of guys. I mean, Brian Westbrook was a second-round pick way back in the day, at 205 pounds, and it took 6 years probably for him to be, maybe not that long, but at least 4 or 5 years for him to become a full-time guy in that respect. And they didn't do it for long.
Well, the thing is, I think they still intersect in a way, Matt. When you say the concern about Lindsey is he's too small, can he hold up? That's obviously a big reason why he went undrafted. Is probably a lot of teams are just like, nope, too small. Nope, too small. Like, just like, yeah, whatever, whether you can play or not, too small. And it still plagues him to some extent. But I mean, I think that Lindsey is the kind of guy that if he didn't have something to struggle against, I mean, it's part of his story. He's going to always have that, and it may be good for him in the long run. We'll see how it is for Melvin Gordon. We'll see how it is for Denver. Just a couple of minutes left, and I've got to be a human being because, we're living through the pandemic of our lifetime. We're living through the nothing will ever be the same event of our lives. And I just want to mention, Matt, because of our mutual love of jazz, that Mike Longo, who was the musical director, the Dizzy Gillespie album Swing Low, Sweet Cadillac?
Yeah, I know who Mike Longo is.
Yeah, we lost him to coronavirus. Yeah. Manu Dibango, who wrote Soul Makossa, the Cameroonian saxophone player. Yeah.
I was just watching, actually, and this has nothing to do with jazz, but I was just watching Ugly Delicious, the David Chang show.
Yes.
And Floyd. I was watching Floyd Carroz, and I'd never known who he was, and I was watching that 2 days ago. And then yesterday I've heard the news about him, unfortunately. And, that's, it's unfortunate that this is what we're going through, and unfortunate isn't even begin to plumb the depths of how people are going to feel, and the hard part about all this is that you won't be able to get to see the people when this type of thing happens. So it's just very important that everyone takes the precautions that they can. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there's a problem with taking even extra precautions when you can to do so, even if doctors are like we were we were having a conversation with some football guys, and I brought in a video about a healthcare provider talking about, taking care of the, your groceries and how you can go trying to create as sterile of environment as possible. And part of the discussion was, well, a couple of doctors say it's infinitesimally small for you to be able to contract the virus through anything other than human contact. And I'm like, well, that's nice. I said, but, I'm also kind of the type of person that's like, you know what? If I don't have to take that chance,
yeah, right.
Why do so? I mean, so, there's things like that. but it's I hope everyone's really being careful out there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's look, there are lots and lots of cases. I encourage people to read the accounts of people who, quote unquote, mild cases, people who aren't being hospitalized. There's a 17-year-old who died here in New Orleans. We're seeing more young people hospitalized. Please take it seriously. We say it because we love you. It's selfish. We want all of you to be healthy and prospering and part of our audience, and spreading the light that you are. And if it's not where you live yet, that you're just part of a wave. I mean, there are probably some places that aren't part of the circulatory system of like their state or very many systems that it may not get to. But just because it's not there yet doesn't mean it's not coming. Like act as if it's coming.
Yeah.
Because it's a sinister thing that is amongst us before we can detect it. But it's really about, because we talked about this chef Floyd Cardo's or these jazz musicians, and how we feel, the sense of loss when they're gone. But we feel a sense of loss because of what they added to our lives. And it's because we love life. It's because we love all the things in life, and we cherish life. We cherish our life. We cherish others' lives and our contributions. And Matt, I was thinking about like just something beautiful that will come out of this is when we all go back to public life. It's going to be like celebrating. It's like New Orleans, because I always say the ordinary is extraordinary in New Orleans, right? We'll celebrate for anything here. Everything's worth celebrating. Being alive is worth celebrating. We're all miracles. And when we get back to doing the things, I see people starting to say like, oh, what I would do to get to do this again, like watch an NBA game live or see some live music or eat at this restaurant and sit down and have whiskey or whatever. It just reminds you of how much you love being alive. And hopefully this is a time for all of us, pray that we all can stay healthy. We can recenter. We can be healthier. We were talking about this before we came on the air, Matt, that we're thinking a lot more about our health now. Recenter ourselves in our homes, recenter ourselves with the people that matter the most to us, and just being more present in our life. This pause, hopefully I see a lot of stuff about boredom. I see a lot of stuff about just having to handle this indefinite time. But hopefully it can be something that's a renewal for us individually, for our communities, for our country. I pray.
Well, it starts, I think more than anything is just, I think those are great points. And I think it's a beautiful thought to put out there. I think that people need to know, and I'm not poo-pooing it and I'm not patronizing it or I'm about to throw a wet blanket over it or anything like that. I really do. I think it's a beautiful point. I think that also it probably more than anything, it just starts with the individual. So, if you're bored or if you're stir crazy or anything like that, just try and think creatively about some things. There's a lot of things that you can do, when you have this much time. And there's things that you can learn there. My wife and I both started businesses because we wanted to learn something new. Years ago, around the same time I was starting the RSP, my wife started, doing her own, renovations and doing her own work on her house to the point that she ended up, creating a business and left Haynes Brand Corporation, basically because she had so many clients that it was time, that she could take a step out there and do that for a while. And it's a great skill to have. And I think that, if you're someone that has, you've got those tools in the garage that you've never used, but you can get on YouTube is such a great place to learn so much nowadays.
Right. It's the Oracle. We have access to the Oracle during a pandemic.
So take that time to do that. Do something that's going to add something to your life and to be able to, something that's going to enrich you, or just be able to have focus time with your kids. Maybe you learn something together, and those are types of things that can be absolutely fantastic. I can't wait till the end of this week because while I got plenty of RSP stuff to do after the RSP is over still, but I mean, there are things that I know that my wife and I want to do with the house and get things going that we're going to be able to do, just from, within the home. And those are things to look for. So, yeah, well, Brian, let me tell you something about Brian over here. No, I hope, Brian, you guys are all doing well.
Yeah, hopefully it's a time that you, like you said, cook or sew or do old fashioned things like hand write a letter or make phone calls. Spend time just chatting
Play
with people on
games.
the
Play,
phone.
there's
Games. I love jigsaw puzzles. Like I
yeah.
said, I'm gonna give one more plug for jigsaw puzzles. Were actually like sold out at some of the places I went to because I had to get them online. But so I guess I'm
Yeah,
not the only one thinking that. And
yeah,
alcohol.
putting these scouting reports together are like a jigsaw puzzle all
Yeah.
year. So I get you. I feel you. I can't wait to play some cards.
Oh,
Even
sure,
something as
sure.
simple as Uno. My wife and I
I
play a lot of
understand.
Uno. If we, because there's other card games we would play, but there's just the two of us. So Gin and Uno are pretty much the ones that are it. But hopefully, we'll look forward to playing spades again one day.
Nice, nice.
Group of people.
And you can use that jigsaw puzzle graphic when you do the video RSP one day. All the little pieces of the report fitting together. Matt Waldman, RSP, everybody. We love you, everybody. Stay safe,
Yes.
and we'll be back. Like we always are. No off season in fantasy football. Hopefully, get Cecil Lammey back here on Thursday night soon too.
Yeah,
'Cause he's
that'd be
working
nice.
hard in Denver. But as always, everybody, wash your hands.
Yeah, Brian.